We are watching World of Warcraft, the Burning Crusade 2007, behind the scenes, the DVD itself, in preparation of TBC anniversary hype. And I want to see how they talk about TBC, how the devs vibe and react and just explain their thought process of designing TBC, why they made it the way it is, and how much of that translates into the modern day and age with anniversary literally right around the corner. So we're going to dive right into it.
Blood Elves made their debut in Warcraft 3 expansion, The Frozen Throne. And pretty much in that story we saw the High Elves were in pretty bad shape since their homeland had been destroyed by the Undead Scourge. And their leader at the time, Prince Kael'thas, rose up to figure out a way of how to cure his people of their magical addiction. And his solution to that was pretty much enslaving his people to the demon Illidan, who in turn for their service promised to teach them how to sate their magical addiction and become very powerful.
I think it's interesting to note about the Blood Elves that they have a rich history in Warcraft lore. They used to be High Elves, and High Elves were part of the Alliance. If you played Warcraft 3, your sorcerers and priests were High Elves. So it's interesting to see them on the other faction at this point. It's also interesting to note that Lady Sylvanas Windrunner was once a High Elf and therefore a Blood Elf, and she...
God damn! If this is what Sylvanas used to look like as a High Elf, I too would have sieged down Quel'Thalas. I'm just saying I understand Arthas a little more here. But no, jokes aside, it is kind of cool to see the old design of what Sylvanas would look like as a High Elf. And you can see the design of her here. I'm not sure if her hair was always black. I thought I remembered her being blonde initially. So I'm not sure if this is just like a sketch, like a black and white sketch. Her hair is actually meant to be blonde. But this is like a cool old design of her. As you can see, like a Warcraft 3 design. I think this is what this is based off of. But it is cool to see them, even when they're designing a race, look into the rich history of it and try to make that shit stick and vibe and like connect to the current world. Connect to the game as we know it, the universe as we know it. So I do like that with the old race designs. They know the Blood Elves and the High Elves used to be Alliance, and they just go, we know that, but we have a good reasoning, and we're explaining it because Sylvanas, Forsaken, Blood Elves. But I'll just let the video keep playing.
She's on the Forsaken now. After she regained her will from Arthas, she led the Forsaken Crusade, and now you've got the Blood Elves naturally allied with the Horde through Lady Sylvanas Windrunner. So I think there's some really interesting story elements going on there.
In the Burning Crusade expansion set, we see the Blood Elves, a few years later, have indeed embraced Illidan's path and become very powerful, but they've definitely lost their souls. And that's a major theme that plays out through the quest lines.
What we tried to do with the quests was naturally guide the player through Blood Elf lore and catch the player up with why are the Blood Elves here, why are they on the Horde, why is it important for this expansion, the Burning Crusade, to have Blood Elves involved. Some of the earliest quests for the Blood Elves, for example, involve using the racial ability.
Every race in our game has some specific racial abilities that sort of make that class, that race unique. What we did with the Blood Elves is we focused on the kind of vibe that we've built for them, that they're this race that's very addicted to magic, that they can't get enough of it. So both in selecting primarily classes that are mana-oriented classes, and then by also selecting racial abilities that emphasize magic. For example, the mana tap ability that all Blood Elves have that allows them to kind of sap mana from the target and also build up a little bit of a buff that leads into their next ability, which is Arcane Torrent. And Arcane Torrent kind of sucks all the magic in the area around them, silencing nearby targets and kind of restores some energy or some mana for that character. So what we've done is we've tried to focus on abilities that reinforce those themes that we've developed for the Blood Elves.
Blood Elf Paladin was quite an interesting one to talk about, in terms of lore especially. So they refer to themselves as Blood Knights, even though they are paladins. they cannot embrace the light. Rather, they see the light as this thing for them to manipulate.
We thought the game would play a lot better at the highest ends if that class option was available for the Horde. So as we sat around trying to figure out, well, this is certainly a break in the lore, you know, how the hell are we going to rationalize this one? We came up with a pretty cool hook, which was Blood Elves overall kind of lost their faith in the light following the events of Warcraft 3. You know, the undead had ruled their kingdom and the light wasn't there for them in their darkest hour. It was, but they didn't use it very well. And so
It was, but they didn't use it well. My man just threw shade in an event he wrote. My man's like, it's your fault Arthur sacked Quathalas. You should have used the light. It was there for you. I'm just sorry. It's just a little funny anecdote. But I do love that they knew they were breaking the law. They knew they were doing something that didn't make sense and they had to adapt it for gameplay. And they chose to try to write that in a way that felt satisfying. They could have just used the very easy, well, it's Blood Knights, but just for gameplay purposes, it's Paladins, right? But they're not actual Paladins. Blood Elves can't be Paladins, it's just Blood Knights. They could have done that, wrote that down in the lore, and let it be. That, you know, gameplay-wise, everybody would have been like, yeah, sure, makes sense, and then nobody would have cared. But they wanted to make the gameplay transition into the lore as well. So they actually created a storyline, a way for Blood Elves to become Paladins. And I love that kind of ethos of design, the ethos of creation, where everything has to somewhat fit in. It's that 2004 vanilla vibe, the 2004 storytelling, where they're continuing off the Warcraft 3 arcs, the Warcraft 3 story beats, and making that stuff actually fit in perfectly, or as perfectly as they can.
Their bitterness, they kind of turned from the light, and the prospect of them stealing the light or bending it to their will really meshed with their kit.
Their personality really fit that faction, you know, kind of cursed on the inside. But at the same time, they are relatively, you know, attractive race. At a glance, they kind of might not look like they fit on there, but when you play the game and you get into their quests and their story, and you start seeing more of their emotes and sort of the subtleties of the race, you'll really see that, yeah, they obviously fit on the board.
I like that they just had to throw that in there. They're a very attractive race. They are. The Horde needed that. The Horde definitely needed an attractive race because, honestly, people may not know this, but it was said, I think, like in one of the BlizzCons in 2015 or 16, I forget when exactly, but people are saying, did you guys make Pandaland for, you know, the Chinese player base? And they said, no, we made Blood Elves for the Chinese player base because the Chinese player base did not really play the Horde. They wanted to pick the more attractive races. So the Blood Elves were initially, well, they didn't just make the Blood Elves for the Chinese player base, but they made an attractive race so the Horde would get more numbers, and that was for the Chinese. Mr. Pandaria was for them. They wanted to do Mr. Pandaria themselves. That's just a funny little anecdote. I forget which BlizzCon they said this at, or which interview was said at, but it was kind of a funny anecdote to just throw out there like, oh yeah, by the way, completely different reasons than you thought. But they are a very attractive race, I ain't gonna lie. If I was in Azeroth...
A lot of the High Elf architecture, as we understand it, was held together by magic. The High Elves, or the Blood Elves, as we see them now, are dependent on, their whole culture is dependent on magic. And the Sunwell was the source of that magic, and when the Sunwell was destroyed, the architecture that was being held together by this magic started to fall apart. So part of their main city, Silvermoon, half of it is completely abandoned and run down because there's no more magic left to hold these buildings into place. And the buildings that they have taken over and remain standing in pristine order, they're using demonic energies to maintain the architectural structures.
The Blood Elf exterior zones are very unique because they're the first exterior zones that we built for the expansion. So we were learning some lessons along the way, but I think that we tried to do a pretty good job in making something different for players than they've experienced before. And the main thing about that stands out is Silvermoon City. Silvermoon City is the home city for the Blood Elf race, so the Horde was finally able to get its giant grand city.
So Silvermoon City is a great example of one of these areas. It has the pristine area which the Blood Elves have been rebuilding and was untouched from Arthas. There's the dead scar that goes right through the center of the city and is complete and utter devastation. Then the ruins of Silvermoon which have been abandoned. They got cut off by the Scourge, so they haven't bothered to rebuild that. They just moved everybody over to the pristine side.
We decided to take one half and make it the city proper, and take the other half and turn it into what we call like a sub-zone, which is a small area that we expect players to quest and adventure in. And that's where we send players on early in the game. So they go through there, they play a couple quests, and then they exit out into the rest of Eversong, which would be the rest of the actual Blood Elf zone.
What's kind of cool is, if you guys think about it, this was designed back in 2005 or 6. I don't know what year exactly they started building Silver Moon and TBC, but it was it wasn't 2006 itself. It was probably slightly before that. And it's been essentially 20 years, 19 years since Silver Moon has been revisited. And in Midnight, the upcoming expansion for retail, they're finally fixing this. They're fully updating all of Quel'Thalas, Silver Moon City, all of this entire zone. Ghostlands and Quel'Thalas is being completely rebuilt from the ground up. And after 19 years, it's insane that we are effectively following the vanilla trilogy. I don't know if you guys realize that, but The War Within was meant to be vanilla. Midnight's meant to be TBC. And The Last Titans, essentially Wrath of the Lich King. It's a trilogy, completing the Warcraft 3 story arcs. And that's kind of cool. That's all I'm saying. It's just kind of cool.
Well, Sunstrider Isle plays a pretty big history into the Blood Elves because originally they've been there for a long time, but they've been pushed there. Originally they were out over the rest of Eversong, a little bit of the Ghostlands, but over time they've been oppressed and pushed back. So for us, it always works out really great to have a small starting area because we can keep the players, not necessarily enclosed, but we can keep them where we want for quests. And for a lot of people who are just learning how to play the game. They're level 1, they're level 3, so tend to not want them to get too far off a road or get stuck in a dungeon they might not want to be in. So doing an island like that that's connected right off the edge of the coast plays really well to that aspect for us.
I love this. Honestly, I love seeing how they design and build a road and zone. Look at this. This is, I'm trying to see exactly where this is meant to be. But let me keep playing for a second. Regardless of where it is, I love you can see how they design things, the aesthetic, the art style, the direction they take. It's really cool, and it makes me really happy to see things like this. This is always part of the coolest things of like game design for me, is seeing the devs build up from the ground up. Like honestly, I would love if the classic devs released a video showing how they built Scarlet Enclave, like a 30-minute video going, this is how we did it, we implemented this onto the zone, put this on and built this on. But seeing things like this always makes me happy. This is really cool. And as for, it doesn't make sense considering how the Scourge got to the Sunwell, considering it's on its own island. Original Warcraft 3 maps, it was a bridge. It wasn't a very big island. It wasn't super far away, and there was a bridge from Silver Moon essentially to Quel'Thalas. And that bridge wasn't like super long. You needed the magical bridge to get there. But like, if you look at the old map, it's kind of like Morrowind from Elder Scrolls, how they have that island right there in Morrowind. I forget the island's name. And there's like, you can walk to it essentially. It was kind of like that. It wasn't this super far away thing that we get in TBC. They changed the lore and the world to kind of adapt and tweak things around a little bit.
For the Blood Elf outfits, we wanted to pull from some of the same designs that are prevalent in their the rest of their environments. A lot of their designs are really regal and pretty. There's a lot.
If this armor was in game, every single Blood Elf player would be wearing this. This armor, I don't think they ever added it. Maybe they added it eventually, but this is not armor you could get initially.
Gold, intricate filigree, and a lot of primary colors, reds, purples.
The main influences with the Blood Elf items and weapons would be kind of similar to what their outfits were, which was that they're these very kind of like supermodel type people and more of a clean race. So taking that sort of thing into consideration would be just, the color scheme, the warm color scheme, the things that kind of key into that character type.
Wait, I just want to go back a second.
Things that kind of key in.
For a while there, Blizzard would never do shit like this again because you guys remember they had the Cosby suite and like all the sexual allegations. So Blizzard went from being showcasing beauty, you know, like the female body, the male masculinity, all those different things, to just being ain't nothing like that. You get bald Thanos because we are staying away from everything. But you can see, look at these old art designs and how they tried to create the supermodel race, the design of the Blood Elves. And honestly, I just want to say, imagine being an ugly Blood Elf. Like, imagine you're a 7 out of 10 and everybody else is an 11 out of 10. You're ugly and you leave the Blood Elf kingdom as imagine you're 7 out of 10 female Blood Elf. You leave. You're like, I'm ugly here. And then you go to Lordaeron, everybody's like, God damn, you're a smoke show. It's like from Miami to some random ass suburbs in like Iowa.
To that character type, they're very much like a red and a gold color scheme, you know, like kind of red bases with gold accents. So we always want to kind of hammer that home and make sure that that's a very, you know, primary part of what makes up the weapons and all the stuff.
We're trying to kind of make it seem like the Blood Elves are the evolution of Night Elves. They are, you know, the step up. They've kind of evolved. They were, you know, in love with magic, and, you know, they had this lust for magic. So they kind of shied away more from the traditional Night Elf feel. So the differences are, you know, they are definitely.
I like some of these styles, like you can see the design, how they did these. This does look nice. I'm pretty sure almost all of these are in-game. I don't know if all of these are actually in-game. I'm pretty sure they are, if memory serves right. But they really did go out their way to design a supermodel race.
Feel.
And then the next race we got was Worgen and Goblins. And then we got Pandaren, which is honestly,
So the differences are, you know, they are definitely a lot more dynamic. Maybe not very gymnast or very flowing, but a lot more stronger looking in terms of posing, and their posture, their silhouettes are definitely strike a little bit more dynamic feel.
They are definitely anime for sure.
You know, they're definitely more humanoid looking. You know, they don't really have any dangly parts or, you know, holes in their faces or huge horns or anything. You know, a lot of people who like the aesthetics and the look of the Night Elves will definitely like the Blood Elves.
Yeah, the dance is pretty obvious, I think. The animators kind of surprised all of us with that one.
The male dance, we did Napoleon Dynamite, and in the movie Napoleon Dynamite, there's a scene where Napoleon does a really funky dance routine on stage in front of his high school. So we picked 4 or 5 routines or steps out of that and created the animations from it.
It's still kind of funny to me that after almost 20 years, the Blood Elves are still the most popular race. They've added Highborn, they've added other races, they've added all this shit, and Blood Elves still are the most popular race. Makes me wonder that if they actually added High Elves to the game, would Blood Elves suddenly be less popular? Would all the Blood Elf players shift to being High Elves? Or would they all stay as Blood Elves? I'm kind of curious on that front, because it's interesting that 20 years and this shit is still the most popular race.
The Blood Elf female, we're playing with the idea of a kind of pop culture dance. So we took Britney Spears videos and kind of picked apart steps from several of her videos.
What I hope for the player to take away from the Blood Elf experience is a sense of identity.
Am I evil or am I a good race? Because I think we kind of leave it on the edge there.
The sense of identity for being a Horde character, but a very different Horde character from what they've previously known. Completely different from any kind of Alliance character, because again, the race is a pretty race. They're all beautiful. The women and men of the Blood Elves are beautiful races, beautiful creatures, but there's more to them than that. Who are you? What are you? What do you want?
I apologize for the muting. It's just funny to me that the Blood Elf and the, like they said, they're not just a race that's sexy. They're not just a race that's beautiful. And then they have 2 Blood Elves, male and female, ass shaking on screen. But guys, they're not just a beautiful race. There's more to them than just ass. I'm gonna leave myself unmuted. Whatever, you guys can hear some random sounds here or there.
One of the difficulties with the Draenei is that you can't just summarize them inside of, you know, a 4-minute speech. They're not a 1-sentence group, and it's something we've known about since we decided on, you know, using them as the new Alliance race. We had series villains like Archimon and Kil'jaeden that are from this race called the Eredar. You know, big giant demons, right? Kind of a no-brainer for, you know, a demonic race to lead the Burning Legion. And as we were kind of staring at those models and looking at that concept art, as we were kind of struggling to find the perfect Alliance race to add, that form just kind of came back to us again and again. These guys just look awesome. Trip out, wouldn't it be crazy if we had a lawful good version of these guys, if maybe they weren't always evil?
To this day, in my opinion, the Draenei are the most beautiful race in World of Warcraft. You can call me a furry for that, but I'll stand on that. Female Draenei are at the very top of all the World of Warcraft's races. I stand on business. Y'all can hate me for speaking the truth, but it is what it is.
Draenei originally came from the world of Argus. That's the, you know, home world of the Eredar race. And again, Draenei means exile, so we're dealing with one very specific tribe that was driven out and has managed to survive all these generations. Their experience is more on a cosmic scale. They know more than any other race we've encountered about the Burning Crusade, about, you know, the Naaru and the Legion and the Titans and all of these cosmic forces playing out. So, you know, with the juxtaposition of a very evil-looking form, but a very noble cause and a very, you know, noble ideology, Draenei was a fun experiment to play with.
With the Draenei, we wanted to create a very heroic kind of theme for them. They kind of pose. They're very striking. They have good posture. They're the ultimate good guys in the universe, and they're here to save the day. So they sort of strike these Superman poses every once in a while.
They're
The cool thing about Draenei, and this is something that's I'm not sure if it's very well known, but the Draenei were created essentially, and they shifted the entire lore of the Burning Legion. Because Velen wasn't initially there, part of Archimon and Kil'jaeden. At the initial lore, Archimon and Kil'jaeden had always been Eredar. The Eredar didn't start off as Draenei and then become Eredar, or the Man'ari. They started off as Eredar. From the beginning, they were a vile, evil race. And then the lore shifted and changed. And that's kind of cool that we ended up getting the Draenei out of that. I remember, because I have the TBC book there from the original TBC, right? And if I remember correctly off reading, again, it's been over a decade since I last read it, it did kind of say that the Draenei, the Eredar, came from a previous civilization that Sargeras corrupted, but they were very vague on it, saying they'd always been like an evil, powerful race. And then they changed it for the Draenei and made it so that the Draenei were the original, and then the Eredar came after accepting Sargeras' bargain of power.
Their proponents or their matrons are the Naaru. The Naaru are these massively powerful kind of celestial beings. They're pretty much the angels of the Warcraft universe. Classically, the Draenei have been attempting to become more like the Naaru. They exemplify their altruism. They are empowered by their light.
If anything, the Draenei are probably more pure and good than any other race in the Alliance.
They're definitely more far out than the classic archetypes we've been using so far.
So when creating the Draenei, we wanted to create something that was a little otherworldly. You know, he's got blue skin, he's got interesting proportions, he's got a tail, you know, the females have horns.
The Draenei...
That is peak beauty right there. That right there is peak beauty, chat.
I have a rune on their head, so it exists for making them look really cool.
That actually is called the Mark of the Naaru. It's a blessing placed on their forehead. The way it should be playing out is when you use your racial ability, that'll, you know, come into effect and signify that you are indeed light touched.
We wanted to make it feel like the Draenei were always part of the Warcraft universe.
So the Draenei's beginning areas were pretty unique challenge because we were trying to build a place for a new race to start, but we didn't really have any real estate.
When the Draenei ship, the Exodar, crashed, it sort of scattered all over the place. So there are multiple crash sites throughout northern Kalimdor.
And they basically landed on 2 islands that are off the coast of Darkshore, south of Teldrassil. And these islands we separated out. We have one as a 1 to 10 playable zone, and the other is our 10 to 20.
So in Amon Vale, it's sort of a crashed part of the Exodar, and the Draenei are kind of throwing stuff together, and they're just sort of trying to make this their temporary home. And you'll notice there's crates and boxes everywhere. They're sort of setting up camp.
Hey, Gray.
I think what punctuates the Draenei starting experience is the fact that there's a sense of urgency. Right away, you realize that you're part of some catastrophe or something really important. There are a lot of injured people around. It's up to you to help heal fallen Draenei who aren't doing as well as you are. You have to figure out what the situation has done to the surrounding environments.
They've crashed on Azeroth while they were trying to escape from Outland. Their craft that they were on basically got hijacked by Blood Elves and crash landed.
So what we discover in Blood Mist is that the Blood Elves have an actual contingency inside the area, and they're facilitating the corruption that's spreading from the power core, which is the Exodar's power core.
You're not really going to have to think a lot about what you're going to need to do. The quests will seem to make sense to you because they fit the lore.
Sad that they had to add these places onto Outland's map instead of Azeroth, purely tech limit. It was a thing of, they could have added it onto the world base itself, but because of flying and a few other things, it just made more sense and was easier to just add that shit onto Outland instead. And the other major reason is connecting zones to vanilla zones are actually a lot harder than people think. It is tech limit, like you said, and it would have took more time and energy than it was worth it. It was purely feasible. But in terms of money and time versus output and reward, at the time, I don't think anybody really cared that it was separated. I think at the time, everybody just said, it is what it is. It's Outland. It's a new expansion. Who cares? But looking back at it now, I kind of wonder if they should have spent the extra resources on connecting it to vanillas, like the map itself. And I wonder if that would have made the world feel more seamless. But at the same time, imagine you're a level 20 exiting into Eastern Plaguelands, level 60 mobs. It would have been kind of funny.
Usually with a zone or a race, I always like to look at something that you've seen in the world, like this zone needs to look like a Tibetan monastery, or this zone needs to look like a redwood forest. Well, the tricky...
Also, I should have mentioned, the reason they don't connect to Cataclysm is the old zones, the vanilla zones, Vanilla and TBC and Wrath of the Lich King, they don't actually have the outer world properly designed. So if you go outside of, the Ghostlands and Quel'Thalas and the High Elf stuff, a lot of the buildings aren't finished. So if they had connected that shit to Cataclysm's world, if they had connected it, when you fly through Cataclysm, you would see Silvermoon's unfinished. You would see the backsides of the mountains all broken and ruined. Because they didn't actually finish the behind the scenes. Just what you can see. So if you glitch around, somehow go out of it, like you use a private server or mods, you can see how broken it really is. But in Midnight, they're fixing that. In Midnight, well, I don't know about the Draenei stuff, just the Blood Elves and the High Elves. They're fixing that. I think they're going to connect it to the Cataclysm. I don't know if they will. It's kind of interesting. We're going to see. But it looks like they're rebuilding. So you have the old outlet, you have the old Quel'Thalas and Ghostlands separated in its own TBC instance, and then you have the new one built onto the Cataclysm map. So that's going to be cool.
Thing with the Draenei, they came from another planet. We really had nothing to base the Draenei on.
So your first encounter with the Draenei architecture is in Amon Vale, and that's just a small fragment of your giant ship that crashed, and which is in fact a small section of even a larger ship that you'll find out about later in the game.
We decided early on that the Draenei would have a lot of crystal energy and crystal-related architecture that would be infused or inbound in their architecture.
Where those crystals came from and why they're there and what role they play in the story is all something that will eventually unfold in the game.
We came up with something that you couldn't really identify as anything that relates to this planet.
It is very otherworldly and
As you
alien.
progress in the game, is
Like one interesting facet, I know I pause a lot, but this is a reaction. One interesting thing about this is it was such a contrast to the world. Like we always knew the Burning Legion was otherworldly and wild, but then to have an alliance race have better technology than everybody else by miles, this made Gnomish and Dwarven technology look like caveman, essentially. And then they never did anything with it. It was just kind of like a little lore gap where it's like, well, all this tech, well, it's all broken. It doesn't work. It doesn't work right now, eventually. And then in Legion, they just power up a spaceship and they go into space, and then you have the Argus battle. Always kind of cracks me up, though. I just wanted to like say that.
the Draenei, you know, you'll start to see a little bit more of their themes come through with their armor and their clothes. A lot of their items and weapons and their clothing have these crystals on them, which are prevalent in their ship, in their architecture.
I'd say you play like newer games and their weapon designs may be really cool looking, but as a gamer, if you can't make a connection, you don't really appreciate what the weapon does.
Draenei incorporate a lot of crystals and stone of like almost metallic kind of nature into their items, armor.
The Exodar is the crashed craft that the Draenei came down onto Azeroth on, and it's buried halfway into the side of a mountain.
Yeah, walk into Exodar the first time, you're like, what the hell is this?
As far as looks go, it looks completely amazing. It's just a whole new art style than we've ever kind of tackled before, and I think it really stands out on its own as a city. All of their operations that they're trying to still figure out what happened, why did they crash here, what are they going to do? I think the centerpiece of all of that is here at the Exodar.
With the Draenei, we wanted to create something that you would never expect to see in World of Warcraft, while at the same time, it couldn't look too far out that no one could relate to it. I think we struck a pretty good balance with it.
What we want the players to come away with from the Draenei experience, that they've taken on the main heroic role for their people, that they're kind of at the forefront of that.
What happened to my race? How did I end up here? Where do I want to go?
We want to give them that identity, but we want to give them that purpose.
We're extremely happy with the way the Draenei came out. Very unique look.
We could have done a lot of things. We could have added, ogres and goblins and Naga. There's all sorts of cool races in Warcraft that
Ogres and Naga. This man has been teasing everybody for 20 years. 20 years and still no ogres or Naga. That's all I want to say.
I want to get to one day, and that would be a lot of fun to play. All these races have cool, histories and a lot of character, but Draenei felt like a radical choice. It's definitely not the same thing. Even Blood Elves, as whack as they are, being part of the Horde, not as radical an argument, but Draenei, you gotta be crazy to even try that. And I dig that. We went kind of crazy with it. We'll have to see how it plays out.
The passion that Chris Metzen has. This man's like, I can't wait to do ogres. I can't wait to do goblins. I can't wait to do Naga. If only. Like, now that he's back, we might actually get ogres and Naga as a allied race in retail at some point in the future. But he knew back then that the Draenei was outlandish and wild for World of Warcraft. And he still said, I don't chase trends, I make them. And guess what he did? He made those trends. If you guys didn't realize, I'm a Chris Metzen glazer. I actually love the man. I think he's phenomenal. He inspired me as a writer because I was a young kid when TBC came out. Like, I was pretty young. And a lot of my writing and a lot of my world building, like, I've been DMing for essentially 20 years now. I started at a very young age. And all of that is because of Chris. And like, a lot of my world building, my inspirations, it comes from World of Warcraft. And to this day, a lot of what he's designed and written, from the troll races, the night elves, the Burning Legion, and so many storylines, he is one of the best world builders. I'm not going to say writers, because I don't think he actually writes the story as much as he writes the notes and the world itself.
It's definitely not old hat fantasy. There's nothing Tolkien-esque about Outland, and that's what I dig about it. It's just kind of a breath of fresh air. And while it looks really funky, right, planets, spinning in the background, the twisting nether, just these crazy zones of, floating continents out in space, it holds together pretty well.
Hellfire Peninsula is the first zone that players will experience when they travel up to Outland through the Dark Portal. Basically, you'll see a landmass just ripped apart from all of the devastation that's taken place on Draenor. And this is Outland. When you walk through that Dark Portal, we are defining Outland in that moment.
I will say, very few World of Warcraft expansions or very few games, MMOs, had the raw shock factor and raw value at the time, I need to clarify, of walking through the Dark Portal. As a young kid, when I walked through the Dark Portal, I was shell-shocked. I was like, wow, Outland, this is amazing. I remember this from Warcraft 3. This is so cool. And it's a memory of nostalgia that will always live here. It's one of my core memories, seeing Black Temple for the first time and seeing Illidan fall and entering Outland and Hellfire Peninsula.
Outland was new territory. We would come to meetings and we're usually expecting some kind of outline from Metzen, and he would come to meetings and say, well, okay, what do you guys want to do here? And I'm like, well, I don't know what's going on with this zone. And Metzen would be like, I have no idea either. We've never done anything here before, so let's just go crazy.
Initially, we call this the crazy times. We have some times where we'd come up with some interesting far out ideas about how or why these would work, and we basically just iterate upon it to a point where it makes sense in the storyline and we're all happy with it. When we're all happy with it, we just set it in there. It's set in stone at that point. It's in the World of Warcraft lore encyclopedia at that point. But the lore is insanely important. It's immensely important.
We joke about the epic scale of a lot of the things in our game, but sometimes to really get the point across of what you should feel like as a player, the epic nature of this expansion, I think it all sort of is defined by that portal.
The orcs in the Dark Horde era, when they first became the Horde and they were planning on, let's go conquer other worlds, right? They built big, they built to last, they built it to be something that, stirred the warrior heart as they're marching off in these giant columns down the path of glory, they were going to go conquer a world, and they wanted the doorway, through which they entered that world to be as grand as possible.
The thing that struck us the most was the materials that they would build with. This is more or less their home planet. The orcs sort of invaded Azeroth, and so when they came through the portal back in the day, they didn't bring a lot of their original materials with them. When we were looking and thinking about the Outland orcs, they would have had a lot more materials, a lot more refined tools and things like that to construct their elements with, and so we were able to work in a lot more metals and more interesting architecture, more solid architecture, not so pieced together. It was much more purposeful and military in style. It was very hardcore, just overbearing. They wanted to make sure that their presence was known and felt on that planet, and so when we looked at that, we sort of ran with that theme. It's such an iconic thing. I mean, everybody's seen it for the last 2 years on the start screen, this small dark portal, so we wanted to expand on that and show them what this expansion is all about.
One thing that's kind of cool is it makes me wonder what Outland would look like in 2026, 2027. Like, imagine after The Last Titan, the next expansion is the Return to Outland. And we have a fully revamped, updated Outland world, the universe, the entire world building. Seeing what's happened in the past 20, how many years has it been lore-wise? I think lore-wise, we've done 30, 40 years. My memory is not exactly fully up to date since vanilla to now. I think it's been 30 years or 40. Going back to Outland, imagine all the stories that changed, all the world that changed, all that's happened there. Hellfire Peninsula, but in fully high fidelity graphics, that'd be pretty cool. Holy shit, look at this Illidan. What the hell is this nightmare? Why does he look like he has troll tusks? He doesn't, that's just dust on my screen. Look at that demonic face. Illidan looks like he's a fever dream. Illidan here looks like when you go to bed and the pilot closes on the door right behind you and it starts to take a visage and a shape. That's what Illidan looks like right here.
Hellfire supports, an alliance base and a horde base themselves. Some pretty cool stories. It definitely, the breadth of the zone allows us to tell stories and create quest lines that are evocative of that Warcraft 2 expansion set and the whole history of the alliance and the horde in this area.
For us to express, we wanted to really play off to the history of the zone. We're doing a lot of new zones here that players might not have heard of and not have seen, but Hellfire is one that kind of hits home because it's really got a lot more lore involved in it.
Lore and quests are extremely important. Every quest we do has to go through Chris Metzen, our creative director. No matter how small, we pass by whatever quest we can, and we try to tie in the lore to almost every quest. We really do want to make that as part of the backbone, the foundation of any quest.
All of those thought processes sort of came together to form Hellfire Citadel, so you see it now.
Goddamn, this shit gives me like the heebie-jeebies. It just makes me remember the World of Warcraft lore and world building I used to love. I remember being absolutely in love with World of Warcraft storytelling and the lore and the thing. And I'm not gonna lie, in recent years, since about early Shadowlands, because I tried to have faith through BFA, but early Shadowlands, I kind of stopped caring about the lore. And the War Within looks pretty cool. Midnight's looking pretty cool, but I haven't really rekindled with the lore. I still keep up to date on a very surface level, like very bare understanding. Like I am now lore-wise for modern WoW, the same as a lot of just the raiders were back in the day. But I used to be deep in the weeds of World of Warcraft's lore. And retail hasn't recaptured me with that storytelling yet.
Hellfire Citadel's got a really unique silhouette, so on the horizon when you're walking up to it, it's in the middle of a canyon. It really stands out.
Hellfire Citadel was based a lot on previous orc architecture. Obviously, the old world orcs are the ones that sort of inhabit this. So we looked a lot at the existing orc architecture that we have in the World of Warcraft. But then we also had to think about exactly what would differentiate outland orcs from the orcs that inhabit Azeroth.
Hellfire Citadel is our first 5-man dungeon that players will be experiencing in the expansion. It's a winged dungeon, which for anyone that played the original game will remember as Scarlet Monastery.
I think one of the first wings that the artist completed was the military wing, and it looks awesome. It's you'll see regiments of orcs, fell orcs marching around. You'll see armaments and battlements and weapons all stacked up. These guys are ready for battle, and it really comes across in the environment in the dungeon. It's it's a relatively dark section of the dungeon, a lot of heavy red underlighting. You've got these giant burning cauldrons sort of hanging from the ceiling. They're sort of their defensive battlements that maybe they could turn down.
This dungeon on Heroic is absolute AIDS.
Open up on people. A lot of heavy chains, and it's just got this super oppressive military kind of theme to it. One
wing is basically revolves around the demons and the warlocks, orcs that live there and created the Citadel. We have another one where all of the orcs are being trained, and that one is we call it the military wing, where they're training them to get ready to go back to battle. And then the third wing is the Ramparts wing. And the Ramparts is basically where you get to fight up on the ledges and the battlements all around the Citadel, but not necessarily inside of it.
I kind of wish we had more, as they called it, like these instance dungeons where it's like a mega structure and you have 3 or 4 dungeons built inside of it. And I kind of miss that. I kind of wish like they went back to that vibe where you would go to a location and it would be like this ginormous citadel. There's 7 dungeons in there, 2 raids, have fun. I like that. And maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm kind of unique in that, but I miss those vibes.
A lot of work goes into building a zone like Hellfire Peninsula.
And we always want to top ourselves. We want to make things a lot better than the original Warcraft, World of Warcraft, so we're happy.
And I think that for any player, we're going to very much satisfy that craving for more World of Warcraft and and not only supply more, but supply some new and different stuff that they've never seen before.
Because it's cool. Because Epic is cool.
We wanted to hit you over the head with something you've never seen before.
And it's going to be cool. It's like a whole new game. I can't wait.
It absolutely was. It's a beautiful zone. It's my favorite expansion. Oh, that's all I'm saying.
Well, I think music's really important for video games. Ultimately, audio is a huge part of the immersiveness of any virtual space, any game space. And I think specifically a lot of the personality of the Warcraft setting, very specifically the game World of Warcraft, has been defined by its kind of audio scape.
Abso-fucking-lutely. Right here, I want to say, everybody knows the Stormwind theme, the Orgrimmar theme, the Alwyn Forest theme, the Hellfire Peninsula theme, ICC, Borean Tundra, Grizzly Hills. All of those places have some of the most iconic music in World of Warcraft. People remember that stuff. And the way it makes you feel, the way you get your heart pumping and your blood pumping, World of Warcraft has some of the best music in gaming history. I'll stand by that. Not the absolute best. There's been better musical scores, but some of the best.
The music is not meant to be noticed. It's meant to be felt. Typically in a film, you have one composer. That is often true in the game world, but in this case, World of Warcraft is so vast, there's certainly a very practical reason to have more than one composer. In Running Minutes, there is more music in the Draenei and Blood Elf starting areas alone than in the entire original product that was released in 2004.
Wait, there's more music in just the Blood Elf area than all of 2004 vanilla? That doesn't seem right. Maybe it is though. Honestly, I couldn't say one way or the other, but maybe it is.
It took 3 on-staff composers plus some contributions from one of our sound effects staff, and we actually worked with an outside composer on a particular subset of music that was a good match for his talents. An orchestra is so unique in its sound, and while the modern synthesizer and samplers can bring back pretty good memories of an orchestra, side by side there's no contest in terms of expressiveness and musicality and emotion conveyed.
Yeah, that's a good one. The Karazhan theme is there as well.
I wrote a piece of music for the Blood Elf starting area, and the more I got into it, as I began feeling it come together, I noticed how lyrical the melody sounded. It seemed like something you could sing.
Russell asked me to help him out with some of the lyrics for his Blood Elf music, and that's something that's written in Galatian.
The vocalist that we were discussing, the song, it was a beautiful, haunting soprano.
She looked at it, she listened to what we had to say, she put the music up, and in one take, she had us on the floor, just sobbing. It was so, it was just so touching.
I will absolutely say this is a phenomenal piece of music. Genuinely beautiful, genuinely gorgeous. It is beyond measure one of World of Warcraft's strongest suits is the sound design and the art design. Like the things that makes you feel, this piece hits deep. And a lot of World of Warcraft's music pieces hit deep. They all hit amazingly well. Like, I may not be the biggest fan of modern retail storytelling, even if it is getting better, but I will never criticize the music design, the art design, the world design. They nail that every single time. The art team is one of the best art teams on this planet, and they're genuinely phenomenal and amazing. So I have to give credit where credit's due. World of Warcraft, the art and sound team is amazing.
Derek and I sat down and we discussed the two new races and whether or not we could find a vocabulary for each race.
Something like the Draenei, where it's a race that we've never heard before, we've never seen before. You have this race that travels on an interdimensional ship. Their ship is populated with crystals, and I could imagine them growing up around these vibrating crystals, and so I began to formulate these ideas that their cultural music would be something that would revolve around singing and making these harmonic tones as if they were raised around vibrating musics and tones and things like this. So that sort of became the foundation of the music.
When you first come into Hellfire, you hear the kind of surf guitar textures that no one, if you told them to, would think could ever work in the WoW universe and could definitely not work for an opening scene. And for me, it's been a lot of fun trying to get those kind of textures which nobody would expect. Nagran, because it is so pastoral, was an opportunity to do a lot more of the kind of sweet orchestral sound that we had in the original release. The part of Terrakar Forest that's been kind of destroyed and has become kind of one large cemetery, I really tried to key into just trying to capture that kind of brittle, lifeless feeling and menacing at the same time.
Definitely lifeless and menacing, 100%.
Sound is a big, broad brush with as much potential as the visuals, as the story, and as the gameplay to affect your experience as a player.
Karazhan is phenomenal. Sound effects.
The identity of the Warcraft setting is hugely based in how it sounds, in the humor of the creature responses, the ferocity of the monsters, just the ambience, of every zone. You're walking through Thousand Needles and kind of hearing the wind roar, or rolling through Swamp of Sorrows, or Dustwallow and hearing the dripping critters out there in the swamp. It really kind of creates a huge sense of immersion and realism.
The sound effects can tell those stories either right in front of you, they can do it from around a corner, they might tell you something about a room before you even enter it. There's this kind of mid-level where the sounds are meant to be noticed on occasion, but don't necessarily interact with you in any way.
In the Burning Crusade, if you were to ask what makes sound, pretty much the entire game. I mean, you're looking at things that you don't see. You have ambience, you have music, you have monsters, you have little objects all over the world. All of these make sound, and until we get to them and make sound, it's a silent world. I think a great sound designer also is able to create sounds that people never even know they're hearing, because it blends in so perfectly with what's going on in the world. It doesn't stand out, and it just becomes, that's what that object sounds like. A sound designer is responsible for creating all aspects of the game with sound. Anything that's silent, we put sounds on it.
Sonically bringing the world to life.
I have nothing to really say about this. I'm not the biggest sound aficionado, but they did a phenomenal job, and they still do to this day. All these little things, these things that people may not realize, contribute so much to the world and the design and the artistic sense of the game and the world that Blizzard thankfully never lost this. This has always been there, even to this day. But like just seeing them talk about it and break it down, it does make a lot of sense.
With today's technology, it allows sound designers just to go everywhere. I mean, we can take almost anything and make something out of it.
Yeah.
You know? Scraping metal
Absolutely.
and turn it into like a gushing wind blowing bug or something.
And that's the most attractive aspect, I think, of sound design, is this ability to take sounds that most people wouldn't normally consider as being whatever it is that they're experiencing or looking at, and you're layering all these things and making something out of them that's completely different.
We'll often do it here at the office in our studios, or we'll go to a big Foley house in Hollywood and someone who has a really great room full of Foley props so that we can have lots of stuff to use. And we'll have a huge list of things that we need to get, and we'll basically spend the whole day there just making noise. We usually go out and find some interesting place to record, or we have a preconceived notion of something we need in the game, and we'll need to grab source effects for it. So we'll do some research sometimes. That becomes necessary if we need something that's really hard to find. And then we'll just take a road trip or hop on a plane or just go down the street and record some stuff out in the field somewhere that we're going to bring back and manipulate in some way. We've had the opportunity to work with some really amazing animals, including lions and tigers and bears.
Did Joseph talk to you about the pigs?
He talked to me about the pigs. I filmed him with
Did you film him recording the pigs?
I filmed Joseph recording the pig.
I think definitely this time around with sound effects in the game, we've just added so much more. I think the content overall in the Burning Crusade makes up a soundtrack that goes beyond what you would ever imagine.
Definitely sound design.
I think people will really be surprised with, the sound effects that we've really put into making this come to life.
The ambiance is top tier though, for sure. Absolute cinema.
A lot of the VO, more than just what they say and the actual written dialogue of what the races say, it communicates so much about their physicality and about their presence in the game setting.
It's typical, for instance, for dialogue to be fairly obvious. A character speaks, you understand, you process it, and it causes some reaction. Or it could be more subliminal. It could be creepy. It could be almost unintelligible to the point that it's almost a sound effect, and yet it contributes to your sense that a particular boss is more powerful than the last one. Or maybe you've reached the end game of the instance that you're in.
The better to bleed, run away.
We have a writer, we have an historian, and we have Chris Metzen. Those three people all contribute to every line of dialogue that goes into the game.
You need to know who to bring in for the auditions. How old do they need to be? Does it need to be a male? Does it need to be a female? What kind of voice do they need to have? Low, gruff, high, shrill. All kinds of different variations that you can have. Like a goblin, for instance, will be a high-pitched voice and really insane and wacky, or you could have an orc, which is a low, gruff voice and almost Klingonish.
So at that point, I basically start checking against pre-existing lore. Try and make sure that it all makes sense and weaves together to make a really great story. Because that's, that's our chief goal. We love to do the story, bring it across and make it come to life.
So the act of casting voices in a game like this, it becomes pretty important. There are so many different voices that we need to have a variety.
We audition the actors, we find the best actors for the best roles, we match them up, and then after that it's time to bring them in to record. Yeah, a couple more like that last one.
The depths will consume you.
Nice. Let's get one more just like that.
Okay, all I said there was, you gotta give World of Warcraft something. The sound design is almost always on point. The voice design. They always pick the right person for the right voice, even if you don't like the character or the person on screen. The voice is almost always really good, even if you don't, most of the time. Not always, but most of the time they pick the exact right person for voicing.
Gray-haired old lady. But don't let me pull the wool over your eyes. See for yourself what lies beneath those covers. And now, on with the show!
We tried to put as much voice response in there as we could so that the player felt completely immersed in the universe. So they're constantly getting some kind of audio feedback and they feel like this is a living world that they're part of.
Imprisoned for 10,000 years. Banished from my own homeland.
This is beautiful.
And now you dare enter my realm. You are not prepared.
Illidan's voice actor, Illidan's voice is so iconic. Just up there with Arthas, and the Arthas, like King Tyrannus's little quote, "The very forests of Lordaeron whispered your name." Illidan and that scene in Arthas are just so iconic. Like, but Illidan's voice it's so unique, it's amazing.
Imprisoned for 10,000 years. Banished from my own homeland. And now you dare enter my realm. You are not prepared.
World of Warcraft's TBC cinematic is one of the best cinematics ever. I honestly think the only one that tops it is Wrath of the Lich King cinematic, and Wrath of the Lich King cinematic is beyond peak. Watching Arthur stab his sword, the Lich King stab his sword into the snow and the ice. But not counting that, the TBC cinematic is beyond peak. The excitement it made you feel, and the only other expansion, actually, I take it back. It's Wrath of the Lich King, Warlords of Draenor for the amount of hype it made you feel, seeing Garrosh and seeing Grommash just kill Manoroth. And then TBC. It's in that order. Now, in terms of expansion quality, it's, for me personally, TBC, Vanilla, then Wrath, and then Warlords is pretty far down, but it's just amazing the quality of it.
I'm Nick Carpenter, and I am the creative director for Blizzard Cinematics, and today we're going to be taking a look at the two new player races, the Draenei and Blood Elf, and we're going to be taking an inside look at the Blood Elf shot, and pretty much breaking it down and give you guys an inside look.
So I am going to skip past some of this, like the animation stuff, and I'm going to move forward a little bit because where is it? Let's see. Oh, this is how they draw it. Okay. Oh, that's it. That's the DVD. They don't talk anymore. It's just showing artwork for the rest of the trailer, right? The DVD. So I am going to stop that right there then, not because like, you know, anything, but like it's just showing like the cool artwork, and that's like 30 minutes of artwork is what we're watching right here. But I am going to go back and at least finish cinematic thing. Oh no, that was it. They're not really talking anymore. Yeah, we're going to stop it right there. But like you guys can see the artwork. I'm going to fast forward to any point. You guys can see how cool it is. The design, the artistic inspiration. TBC is amazing. It's one of the best expansions ever made. And me personally, I can't wait to dive into World of Warcraft TBC Anniversary with all of you, because I got to experience TBC back in 2007. I got to experience it again back in 2021. And now that we're going into the end of 2025, early 2026, I am once again excited to dive into the TBC, the Burning Crusade, with every single person. And I hope you guys are excited as I am, because the passion that built the Burning Crusade is a passion that is still unmatched. It's the original vanilla team, and the classic devs are cooking. I'm hyped for them, what they're working on. But man, it's hard to beat the vibes TBC brought forth. So thank you for watching. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe. If you hated it, understandable. Dislike and subscribe and become a dedicated hater. Don't half-ass that shit. We hate hardcore on this channel. This was a reaction live on my Twitch. So if you do want to see things like this more often, follow me over on Twitch Monday through Thursday, 1 p.m. EST to 4 p.m. EST. Thank you, everybody. Ebonhardt out. Peace. I'm not actually ending the stream, by the way. That was just like the outro for the stream, because